Ok, como estamos a ver já está. E posso pôr a gravar aqui também, localmente?
Sim, sim.
Ok. Está os dois. Estamos ao vivo.
Obrigado. Então, muito boa tarde a todos. Bem-vindos mais uma vez a um seminário do Mestrado de Investigação Clínica da Faculdade de Medicina da Universidade de Lisboa. Eu chamo-me Ricardo Fernandes e sou um dos docentes do mestrado. Nesta fase em que estamos a ter um módulo sobre gestão de projeto, vamos ter a oportunidade hoje de ter uma ação que creio que vai ser útil para todos, certamente para os alunos de mestrado, mas esperamos que também para quem nos acompanha agora ou mais tarde, sobre qualidade. E podíamos ter muito tempo de formação de qualidade, podíamos ter muitas vertentes de formação de qualidade, mas tivemos aqui um bocadinho a audácia e a provocação de pedir à nossa convidada hoje de nos resumir, num espaço reduzido, uma perspectiva sobre a gestão de qualidade em investigação clínica. E acho que a doutora Sabrina, que eu passarei já a apresentar, vai-nos apresentar aqui as muitas facetas da qualidade em investigação clínica. Eu vou passar agora só a apresentar e vamos mudar aqui para o inglês. First of all, Sabrina, thank you very much for accepting our invitation. We realize it is a challenging topic to tackle in less than an hour. So thank you for accepting that. And I think you're obviously the right person and very capable and knowledgeable and experienced to tackle this. I can't find a better person to do this. Sabrina, you have a chance to talk, obviously, but Sabrina is a pharmacist with over a decade of experience in academics. You hold a PharmD from a French university and a master's in quality assurance from Pdca. And you've worked, and I invite all the students to check your biosketch, because I think it highlights how a experience across a number of areas in clinical research is so important to give you an overview of how quality affects different types of stages and processes in the life cycle of clinical research. So I think you've worked on pharmacovigilance, you've worked on toxicology, or an active professional in what I have to highlight for all the students. The French system is very, very interesting in terms of research in that field. And importantly, we've met in the last couple of years because of a big project called Connect for Children, where you serve as a quality manager and a part of the French National Pediatric Clinical Research Network, this PEDSTART, of which we will hear a little bit. So I've talked too much. Thank you very much, Sabrina, and we're looking forward to hear from you today.
Thank you very much, Ricardo. Thank you so much for your invitation. I'm really, really happy to be with you today for the first time. I will be talking today in my presentation about quality management of clinical research. I am not going to introduce myself because Ricardo made the introduction perfectly. So I will start with this painting from a French painter, Gustave Courbet, and the title of this piece of art is L'Immensité. So this is the vastness in English, and I chose this picture because for me it shows how vast this topic of quality of clinical research is. Really, I think this is really a broad topic. So I won't probably cover all the aspects of this topic, but I hope that at least I can give to you some elements for discussion today. So we are going to start with some basic quality management concepts because I think it is really crucial when it comes to quality to have a common understanding of some terms and some definitions. So we will see what is quality, what is quality management, and also what is quality assurance and quality control, and what are the differences between these words. Then we will have a look on frequent confusions and mix-up regarding quality. And then we will really deep dive into our field in our topic for today by trying to understand why do we need to manage quality in clinical research and why it is so important. And to end this first section, I would like to introduce a concept. This is from my personal background. So this is really my personal point of view regarding quality of clinical research. I hope that it will open discussion at the end of the session. But for me, there are two different aspects that need to be covered. The first one, this is the quality management of clinical trials themselves. But the second one, and it is an important one too, this is the quality management of the clinical research infrastructure. So we will see the difference between these two concepts. And the next two parts of the presentation will be just to maybe go in further details for each of the concepts. So for the quality management of clinical trials, we will try to see what are the risks of poor quality and also what are the easily available tools to prevent poor quality. And the last section will be about the quality management of clinical research. And I'm going to focus mainly on our network experience because I thought that maybe it would be really beneficial to share experience with you. So let's start with some basic quality management concepts. So as you probably know, quality is the ability to deliver value through fulfilling the needs and expectations of customers and other relevant interested parties. So it does include regulatory compliance, but it's important to say that it's not limited to compliance. So quality, this is broader than just the compliance. I would like also to say that customers are not necessarily clients that pay for service. I think this is really important because sometimes there are some confusion when we use the word customers. So within the quality field, a customer, this is a person or an organization that receive a product or a service that is intended for or required by this person or organization. So it can be consumer, of course, it can be client, but it can also be someone who receives a product or a service from an internal process, for example. It can also be a beneficiary. So this is not necessarily the commercial meaning of customer. And in the field of clinical research, customers include, for example, patients and their families, but also investigators, all the healthcare professionals, regulatory authorities, and also the sponsors. So as you can see, quality, this is the concept. The quality management, this is the act of overseeing all activities and tasks that must be accomplished to maintain this desired level of quality. So quality management can include establishing quality policy, quality objectives, but also mostly the processes to achieve this quality objective through 4 different aspects, which are the quality planning, the quality assurance, the quality control, and the quality improvement. So as you can see, the quality, this is the concept, and the quality management, this is the act of overseeing all the activities. So it's kind of different. So here on this slide, you have this really, really well-known and famous Pdca cycle, which is also called Deming's wheel or continuous improvement wheel. Whatever you call it, this is the Pdca cycle, and you have the 4 steps of a quality management approach. So the first one, this is the quality planning that aims to first, establish your objectives, and second, to establish the processes and the resources you will need to deliver the results in accordance with the requirements. So this is the first step. Once this is planned, you can have the do phase that falls under the quality assurance concept that aims to provide confidence that the requirement will be correctly fulfilled. You then have the quality control. This is the check phase. So you are going to monitor and measure processes against the quality objective you have defined during your planning phase. So this is a really important step too. And finally, depending on the results, you will have a quality improvement phase that aim to take actions to continually improve performance. And then the cycle will start again and again. And this is the way you are going to achieve a continuous improvement. So the quality management objectives are multiple. It can depend on your organization, but basically the really common objectives are the following. So improve the customer satisfaction, improve services quality and also ensure compliance, improve the performance, organize and structure your organization, reduce the costs of non-quality, and last but not least, this is to maintain the know-how of your organization. So we have seen quality management, now the quality management system. The quality management system, this is a set of interrelated or interacting elements of an organization to establish quality policies and quality objectives and processes to achieve those objectives. So now the frequent mix-up. This is sentences I hear at least once a month, sometimes more often, it depends. But I thought that maybe it was really good to take these examples and to see what is wrong in these examples. So a quality management system is synonymous with a set of procedures. So this is wrong, in fact, because procedures are only one component of a quality management system. So plus procedure are no longer mandatory according to the latest version of ISO 9001 norm. And what I would like to say is that there are other frequent components of a quality management system that are as much important as procedure and even maybe more important. So it's important to understand that a quality management system is not only a set of procedure. It will include, for example, the quality policy, and we will see it later, the quality objectives, key performance indicators, metrics, process sheet, audit system. All of these components are as important and maybe more than procedure. That being said, procedures remain useful and largely used in most of the organizations. So I'm not going to say that it's not useful, but it's only a part of a quality management system. Another frequent mix-up is procedure and processes are synonyms. So again, it's wrong, and I will try to explain you with an example. So a process, this is a set of interrelated or interacting activities which transforms, I think I missed the S, inputs to outputs. Whereas a procedure, this is a specified way to carry out the activity or the process. That means that the procedure are the steps that have to be undertaken to execute a part of a process. So let's take an example. Making bread, this is a process because making bread will transform ingredients, this is the inputs, into bread, this is the output. So making bread, it doesn't give you any instruction on how to make bread. So if you want to make bread, you will probably use procedures that can support the process of making bread. And they can have multiple procedures necessary. It can be the bread dough recipe, for example, it can be the working instruction for the oven. But as you can see, the process, this is a concept, whereas the procedure, they are really, really operational documents. So this is not the same. And I will finish the frequent mix-up by quality in clinical research is synonymous with monitoring. This is really a frequent confusion. And again, the monitoring, as important as it is, this is only one aspect of quality and one aspect of quality control. So it does not replace the other aspects that need to be implemented to have a high quality clinical trial. I think it's important because as a sponsor, you can't rely only on the monitoring to ensure that you have a high quality clinical trial. It's necessary, but it's not sufficient. It's really important. So that means that you will have to set up a whole system to have a high quality clinical trial. So now let's move on the next part and why this is so important to manage quality in clinical research. When I ask this question to students, sometimes the first answer that comes up is because it's mandatory. Because you have regulation in place and it's mandatory. You have to comply with the GCPs, etc. So this answer is partly correct, but for me, it's important to see beyond this regulation. In fact, clinical trials are conducted to collect data about knowledge or prevention or treatment of disease. And the trial results will either be published and serve as a basis for treatment recommendation or even integrated in an application for marketing authorization. So that means that based on the results, that will potentially lead to prescription to a large numbers of patients. And for me, this is the top reason why you need quality in clinical research. It's because trial conclusions must be reliable. And I think this is really important to understand. So if we want to sum up, why do we need to manage quality? I would say that it's important regarding the regulatory compliance, because as a sponsor, you need to satisfy ethical and regulatory requirements. But there are also two other reasons. Security, that means that quality will lead to protection of the rights and safety of participants, and also the methodology, because having a high quality clinical trial means that you will reduce the likelihood that the results are affected by bias. And we will see that in more deeply after. So here, this is a quote from René Descartes. And I think it applies really well to quality field. And Descartes said that without method, a genius person gets lost. And with a good method, an ordinary person can make useful things. So this is exactly what I mean when I say that you can have a bright idea, a bright scientific idea. You can have, a good hypothesis to test. But if you don't perform a high quality clinical trial, it will be really unuseful. So it's important to integrate quality. The clinical trial, as you know, this is a long process taking years with several steps, and each of these steps needs to be achieved according to a high level of quality. So quality begins with trial design and conception. So the moment you are going to start writing the protocol, you need to think about quality. And of course, in all the stages of a clinical trial, there are some quality requirements to fulfill with. So there are quality requirements regarding the design, but also regarding the setup and conduct of the trial, regarding the data management and the results management, and also when it's come to scientific promotion and publication, there are also some quality requirements. So here is just a diagram trying to show the number of stakeholders that participate in the different steps of a single clinical trial. And it's really simplified. Sometimes it's more complex than this diagram. But basically, for a clinical trial, you will involve many stakeholders. Of course, clinical trial site, and in a single clinical trial site, there are going to be many people involved from different wards, from different units, like pharmacists, like biology, like investigator, imaging. So many people involved at clinical trial sites. The same for the sponsor. There is no single person involved in the clinical trial, but different teams that sometimes do not belong to the same unit. So you have the coordination team, you have the board, the scientific board, the data safety monitoring board, the data management, the coordinating centers. Sometimes you have a clinical trial research network in the landscape that can facilitate the clinical trial. The patient and the families, of course. And also really often the CROs, because some sponsors' activities can be outsourced. So as you can see, there are really many stakeholders. And of course, all the stakeholders belong to different organizations, and each of these organizations can have their own quality management system. And this is exactly where the complexity comes from. It's because a single clinical trial will involve many stakeholders belonging to different organizations during several years and with a complex process and data flow. So as you can see, this is really a complex situation. So now I would like to introduce the concept, because then I will focus on these two different aspects of quality management. So for me, there are two different aspects. The first one, this is the quality management of clinical trial itself. So that means that it's trial specific and it's under the sponsor responsibility. And the aim of this part is to ensure that the different steps of the trial are performed according to the requirements. So the scope of quality management of clinical trials will be the quality of trial design, the quality of trial conduct, the quality of data collection and management, and the quality of both statistical analysis and publication. These aspects are covered by many clinical research guidelines and regulation, including GCP, but not only. And this aspect of quality management is really an operational aspect. So this is going to be undertaken by people who conduct the trial. And there is another aspect, which is the quality management of the clinical research infrastructure. So this aspect, this is a non-trial specific aspect, and this is under the infrastructure responsibility. The aim, this is completely different. This is to ensure that the structure has the level of organization and appropriate resources to perform the trials related activities. So the scope will be completely different too. The scope of this quality management will mainly focus on experience of staff, training, facilities and equipment, internal processes. So it's different. And there are really fewer guidelines and regulation when it comes to clinical research infrastructure. So we can use, of course, non-specific norms, such as ISO 9001, but there are really fewer clinical research guidelines for infrastructure. So this quality management aspect is more focused on the organizational aspect. I think this is really something interesting, because sometimes when we talk about quality of clinical research, people are confused between those two aspects. Of course, they are interrelated. So that means that the quality of clinical trials is dependent of quality of the clinical research organizations that are going to take part in the clinical trial, of course. So each sponsor should consider the quality management of the clinical research infrastructure when setting up a trial. So that means that using these high quality infrastructures is a necessary but non-sufficient condition to obtain a high quality level clinical trial. You need both aspects to obtain a high quality of clinical trial, and specific trial quality measure remains needed for each clinical trial. So I hope it's clear. Of course, I will be open for questions at the end of the presentation. And now we are going to see these two different aspects. So starting with the quality management of clinical trials, just a definition, we could define quality of a clinical trial as the ability to effectively answer the intended question about the benefits and risks of a medical product or procedure while assuring the protection of human subjects. So before continuing, I would like to have a look on the four main types of bias in clinical research. I don't know if you are familiar with this or not, but there are basically four types of bias that can affect the trial results. The first one, this is the selection bias. That means a biased allocation to treatment groups, and it can be prevented by randomization and allocation concealment. Then you have performance bias. This is an unequal provision of care between treatment groups apart from treatment under evaluation, and this can be prevented by the double blinding of both patient and healthcare providers. The third one is the detection bias. So that is a biased assessment of outcome, and this can be prevented by the blind of those assessing outcomes. And finally, you have the attrition bias, which is a biased occurrence and handling of deviation from protocol and loss to follow-up. This is not an easy to prevent, to be honest. You can only prevent this attrition bias by limiting deviations from protocol and loss to follow-up. it was important for me to give you this definition, because the risks associated with poor quality during trial are mainly the risk associated with this bias. So here is the results from a meta-analysis gathering 4 methodological studies. This is a publication by Juni and al. And as you can see, this publication, the conclusions are quite clear. Inadequate or unclear concealment of allocation and absence of double blinding are associated with a risk of exaggeration of treatment effects, respectively 30% and 26%. So that means that if your trial design is not properly conducted, the risk is to wrongly conclude to a treatment effect. So this is really, it shows you how important it is to have quality during trial design. The result for inadequate or unclear generation of allocation has been assessed in only 3 over 4 studies and was not consistently associated with treatment effect. But at least for the concealment of allocation and double blinding, we know that it's really important to have this in place in order to have reliable trial results. Another interesting paper is a paper from Haberman and Hall. This is a survey with more than 1,000 research coordinators and 226 responders who have already witnessed one or more scientific misconducts. And the survey was about the type of violation that the responder have already witnessed. And this is really interesting to see first that it is some violations are quite frequent, and then to see that there can be quality issues all along the trial life cycle. So as you can see, the type of the most frequent violation, this is the protocol violations. The top is the inclusion-exclusion criteria. Then you have all the non-compliance regarding one or several aspects of the protocols. There are also many violations regarding the patient safety, and especially the report of adverse event. And also often you have a lack of PI oversight. There are also many issues about the consent. So many non-conformities regarding the information of patients and their families. Sometimes the problem comes from the documentation of the consent, or non-approval by institutional review board, or what we call the coercive consent. So that means that you will present the protocol to the patient in a way that the patient will tend to say, yes, I want to participate in the trial. So of course, this is a misconduct. Then you have also issues regarding fabrication and falsification of data. So it can easily be creation of data when it's missing, but it can also be fabrication of document, falsification of document, or falsification regarding investigator training and experience. So that means that the misconduct can occur at any stage of the conduct of a trial. That means that the issues are really frequent and can come from any stakeholder in the trial. So this is really, really important to set up a quality management system. Another interesting paper is the annual report of the good clinical practice inspectors. So you can see the main findings during inspections, the main findings of the top 3 main categories. So I don't want to detail this result. They are public. You can find the report on the internet. But you can see that some steps in the trials are really, really critical and often associated with findings during inspections. And I will finish this part regarding the risk associated with poor quality with a slide on the papers that are retracted. As you can see on the diagram, there are more and more retracted papers in the literature. So, and it's sometimes because of fraud or because of error. You also have plagiarism and duplicate publication, but I think it's not our topic today. But that means that you don't have to take all the publication and all the publication results for granted, because obviously there are some unreliable results that can be published and then retracted. So it's important to have really a critical approach on the results. And here you have a screenshot of a new newspaper. I didn't know, but in Sweden you have the Swedish Misconduct Agency for to address this this topic. And the first year of its existence, this agency swamped with cases, so 3 times more than expected. So this is really an important issue for the scientific community, and reducing or at least enhancing, quality is one on the tool available to avoid retractation of paper. So what are the tools available to increase quality in clinical trials? Hopefully there are many tools available and many guidelines available, freely available. So the list I'll give to you, this is not intended to be comprehensive. This is really the main guidelines and the main regulations, but you can find other guidelines, other good clinical practice or publication that can really help you to ensure quality at each stage. So of course, the ICH guidelines are important, and especially the good clinical practice, but I'm sure you're really familiar with this. Then you have all the Science International guidelines that can be also quite interesting. And there are other guidelines available from the European Medicines Agency, from the EN-PRIMA when it comes to a specific topic. I would like to really encourage you to have a look on the SPIRIT 2013 statement and checklist, because for me, this is really an operational document, really useful document for protocol development. So it's really interesting because you have a checklist. So once the protocol is ready, you can have a look on the checklist and check each items in order to see if you fulfill the requirements of the SPIRIT statement. So it's really an interesting tool. So, and now we've seen, I'm sorry, it's really, it's only a few slides, but I have only 1 hour. So now we are going to see more about the quality management of clinical research infrastructures. And I thought it would be beneficial to share with you our network experience. So here, the main steps you have to undertake to implement a quality management system in a clinical research infrastructure. So I'm going to list the steps, and then I will take our approach in the PEDSTART team to maybe as an example. So the first step, setting up a quality management system, is to analyze the organizational context. Then you can define the scope and choose a fitting quality management approach for your organization. You will have to identify and describe the relevant processes of your organization to define the quality policy and goals. And then at a later stage, you will develop the quality documentation, including, of course, the procedures that will best serve the organization's needs. And at the end, we will just take a moment in order to discuss the PDCA and the continuous improvement and how to capture experience and learn from our mistakes, because this is also a really key pillar in the quality management system. So the first step, this is the organizational context. So for PEDSTART, which is the French National Pediatric Clinical Research Network, this is also the French National Hub for the C4C project, which is an IME2 project that aims to build a pan-European pediatric clinical trial network. And this network gathers around 20 clinical investigation centers in France, and also 2 other local clinical trial networks in France. So the coordination of this network, this is managed by a coordination team. So we have a coordinator and a co-coordinator. They are, of course, pediatricians. We also have a clinical coordinator, which is a pediatrician too. And also in the team, a quality manager, project managers, and administrative assistants. So it's important to understand that the network itself does not conduct any clinical trial, but we act as a facilitator for pediatric clinical trials in France. So as a consequence, the scope of the PEDSTART quality management system is limited to coordination activities and services. That means that we are not aiming to interfere with activities undertaken by our members because they probably have their own quality management system in place. And we don't want to interfere with activities undertaken by other stakeholders like sponsor, for example. So we've decided to adopt an ISO 9001 approach in order to build up an ISO-like quality management system. So by ISO-like, we mean that the system will be set up according to the ISO principles, but we don't have any short-term objective to obtain the ISO certification, not yet at least. So here, this is a diagram showing our organizational context. So as you can see, PEDSTART as a network interacts with many stakeholders at both European, national, and local level. We have a complex landscape around us. And in green, you can see our customers. So remember the customer, this is the organization or the person that will receive product or service from us. So our customer are basically the sponsor of clinical trials, but also our members. there are the two group of people that are expecting something from us. In brown, you have the interested parties. So that means that there are people we work with, but they are not our customers. Of course, we should take into consideration their needs, but they are not the main people we are working for, okay? So one important step for the setup of the quality management system is to list what are the expectations of the customers. Because remember, quality, this is the ability to fulfill the customer needs and expectation. So it makes sense to first list what are these expectations and needs. So it can sound quite silly, but it's not as easy to list, in fact. Sometimes you need to have some meetings with your customers saying, okay, what are your expectations towards us? So for us, members of our network, they have expectations regarding training and communication, regarding networks development, and also regarding the support from the network to participate as clinical sites in multicentric clinical trials. The sponsor have, of course, other expectations. They reach us mainly in order to have an easy access for capability, feasibility, and expert. In order to get the support from the network for the setup, the implementation of the trials, and also to reduce the startup times for the first patient inclusion, to increase the recruitment efficiency, including the reduction of non-recruiting sites. And the last expectation is regarding the communication, support and troubleshooting with site research and administrative teams. So this is just an example. If you are a sponsor, of course, you will have different customers with different expectations. If you have a CRO, you will have, again, other customers and other expectations. But the principle of defining your customer and their needs, this is still the same. Once the customer are identified, it's important to identify the relevant processes of your organization. So here, this is the current process mapping for the French National Network. So as you can see, we have 3 types of processes. This is really standard, but we have some management processes in place, some support processes, and of course, operational processes. So that means that in this map, you have all the processes that are undertaken by PEDSTART. Why this is so important to identify processes? Because once it's done, it's important to set up process metrics that can define quantitative and qualitative measures related to the process, to the performance, and to the evolution of the process. So choosing a performance metric is really important, and you can use the SMART acronym as a reminder to remind that every KPIs should be specific, measurable, achievable, relevant, and time-bounded. So let's take an example. We have this process in place, 04 in yellow, of training. That means that as a national network, we perform training of our members. So if we would like to define a performance metric attached to this process, it could be, for example, it's just an example, but the number of people that received a training coordinated by our network in the past year. And of course, attached to this metrics, you will probably have to define a threshold. If you are under this threshold, you will, of course, need to take improvement action. If you are over the threshold, you can consider the objective as achieved. An important step is also to define a quality policy for your organization, because this is a way through which top management can project its commitments toward quality to internal as well as external stakeholders. So this is basically a one-page document that is annually reviewed, and this is an opportunity to set up yearly quality objectives. So for example, for our network this year, our objectives are the following. First, to finalize our recognition as a Category 1 network by NPRIMA, but also to create an association for PEDSTART that will provide us functional autonomy and laying the background for a sustainable organization. And the last objective is to prepare and start organizing a tour of a set of our members. So here are some examples of documents that we have implemented within the PEDSTART quality management system. So this is really basic ones. So as you can see, we have a document management SOP in place. We have a steering committee SOP in place, non-conformities management, new employee addiction. So we have a multiple procedure in place to support our quality management system. I'm realizing that I have only 8 minutes left, so maybe I'm going to shorten my presentation if we want to have some time for discussion. Of course, you will have the slide set anyway, and I would be really happy to ask your question about the last part if you have some. So here are the main take-home messages, but yes, I prefer to stop here maybe and to have a few minutes for to take your questions. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Sabrina. I think that was certainly exactly what we hoped for. I think you've given us a broad overview, but also some examples and concrete examples of aspects of quality. I'm sure that for the students, this will be great, and I hope that they will be looking at your slides very, I'm sure they'll be eagerly looking at your slides, because there are a lot of contact points with the current project management training that they're receiving, both in terms of terminology, concepts, and I think they've just got some good help for their projects that they have to present in a few weeks' time. Let me try to figure out if there are any questions. I know that some of the students are together in a room.
1 hour, it's really challenging. I thought that I will, figure it out, but 1 hour, it's really, really challenging.
Well, I think it was great. Rita or any of the students, do you have any questions? And I'm checking also the live stream to check for questions.
No questions here in the room.
While we wait for our always shy colleagues, Sabrina, I know we have just a few minutes, but I mean, often for often clinicians looking at, going into research, it's all about GCP and SOPs, and that's it, quality, right? For study coordinators working at sites or for people working at CROs, what do you think they can do to sort of try to change a little bit of the culture, or what do you think is the most challenging thing that people are facing when working in this field?
I think that definitely the most challenging part, this is the quality management of the clinical research infrastructure, definitely, because when it comes to the clinical trial, there are so many guidelines and some of them are mandatory. So people are really well aware of this. So I think that we need to shift, the culture, definitely, but it's also up to the regulatory authorities to shift this, because as you can see, the inspection from FDA, from the EMA, it's really focused, on GCP and on the trial. But I think that maybe we need to first to have guideline available for clinical research infrastructure. So a sort of a white paper may be available for both CRO or clinical research network. And of course, it's going to be different depending on the type of your organization. But I think this is something that is changing, because there are a lot of clinical research infrastructure that commit into an ISO 9001 certification. So I think it's going to change in the next few years, probably. And yeah, I think that we need to have maybe more operational document to help CROs and all the stakeholders to set up and build up a quality management system, focus on the organization and not only on the trial execution.
You mentioned, there's certainly a need to do a number of things. And do you think from a site, because I think we, in our audience or people looking at this later, there will be some of our students who may end up working or have worked on a site level, but also some decision makers at site level. I think I know the answer to the question, but is it worth investing on quality at a site level as a research center? Is it worth, or is it more than worth? It is required to do so.
I think it's yes, I would say that it's worth it, but you have to set up a quality management system that fits to your organization. So that means that it's also important not to overburden people with quality, with, it's important to choose the right quality approach for your organization. It will not be the same if you are a big CRO, working for thousands of different sponsors, or if you are a small site enrolling, a few people with only one coordinator and one project manager. I think it's really important to adapt your approach to your organization. But that being said, everyone needs quality, even for the small organization, even at site level. And this is some really, really helpful tools. I wish I could present the issue management, system, because this is typically a tool that can be implemented in every clinical research infrastructure, regardless of the site, regardless of the field. I think it's something, it's a good to have, really, and maybe a required to have, I don't know.
No, I completely agree. And again, there will be slides that are shared and an opportunity to explore that. I'd probably ask you for a final word. I mean, for people doing the masters, and many of them have very different backgrounds, have worked in the field, come from either pharmacists or medical doctors, but I think most will end up wanting to work in clinical research. is there, I mean, you've had experience in working quality in different settings in clinical research. If they want to know more, or if they want to dedicate themselves to quality, do you have any advice or some next stage training opportunities? Any advice on that for our students?
Yeah, there are some master degrees for quality. I think it's good to have, but you can really be trained at any time in your career. There are many training offers, private, in fact, which are really of good quality. For example, I don't know exactly in Portugal, but I think in Europe you have all the LRQA, organization that provide really interesting training and course. What is important is some trainings need to be accredited. So maybe you need to pay attention when choosing a training. For example, for internal audit, there are some, training that will give you an accreditation as internal, auditor. So I think it's important to keep in mind. So it can either be, your initial training, but it can also be, whenever during your career, because it's something that you don't need any background for this. You just need to be interested in the field. So, but if you are really interested, there are some master degrees that can be really helpful.
Thank you very much. I think we're over the hour. I sort of try to ask the questions that I think will be interesting to our students, but Rita, you can then ask them if there are any others in the next few minutes with Tanya too, and we can convey them to Sabrina. Thank you very much, Sabrina, and see you all the students in a few minutes, and we'll have a next seminar for everyone in a week's time. No, in 2 weeks' time, because it's Good Friday next week, and that will be about challenges and opportunities in the management of international research projects with a team from PEDSTART Foundation in Italy. Thank you very much. Sabrina, I'm just going to ask you to keep 1 minute online. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.